Hey guys! So today you and I are going to talk about questions. So let's get into it. So the question in question was posted on a video I made. I don't even remember it. What it's called? What about programming interviews in the EU? And I'm assuming that I'm bragging or something like that about my uncanny ability to spot people that I call fake seniors, because the person asks, now you got me curious, what kind of questions are those that destroy fake senior developers? Well, that is easy. That is really easy. So when I talk about a fake senior, it's maybe I was emotional at that specific point in time, but fake senior is, or you can call it whatever you want, guys. The problem with seniority is that you can't really define what the senior actually is, and the only thing that I see today is that there is a need for something that most people who call themselves seniors are not. So when I work with seniors who cost, you have no idea how much they cost, in term for the company. Most of them are actually not. There's not that much of a difference between them and a mid-level software developer. I see seniors who can't adapt to a basic change in their tooling. I see seniors who won't actually know how to work in a DevOps environment, which is it's becoming fairly standard practice. Like they don't know how to debug a system. They don't know how to do tons and tons of stuff. Like the only thing they are capable of doing is writing the code. And as I've said to you guys before, the that is the level a mid-level developer has to reach to just be able to write the code. But the reality, guys, is that the IT is moving, and people tell me all the time, "Oh, why do they ask me to know everything?" And I go, because the complexity of the systems that you deal with is just increasing, and we can't just hire more and more people for every little tool that you don't want to learn or that you haven't taken the time to learn. And that's why I've told people quite a few times that the best investment for you is to work at large scale, because the larger the scale that you work at, the more exposure you will get to the realities of what it means to run an IT system. And it's very, very rare that you will get to a real senior level. Most companies won't, even if you call yourself a senior, most companies that know what they're doing won't hire a quote unquote senior who doesn't know, so doesn't have the sort of experiences that they are looking for. So we can throw around the term senior. We're just going to invent another term. I think the term now is like principal engineer or staff engineer or like whatever. Like we're just going to invent something else, and senior is going to become what mid-level used to be. But if you ask me what type of questions that I usually ask to figure out, and this is the same questions that I ask everybody when I figure out their experience level. I gave the person a few examples. First question is, how do you test your code? Now you can answer that question in so many ways. And if you are a rookie programmer or someone who doesn't really know anything, you're going to stutter a lot, and you're probably going to say something like, "Oh yeah, I do some local testing, and then I've heard about unit testing, and sometimes I write unit test." That's a beginner level answer, a junior level answer, or like a fake senior answer, or someone who works at a agency and has for most of their life and actually makes mostly static websites or something very small where unit testing or testing strategies are not necessary. What a real senior would answer in that situation would be that, well, basically I write unit tests for that, this is which if we reach a certain level of complexity, but I also write integration tests if I'm working with some specific data model that I haven't tested before, or if we have like a backend API or something like that that I'm connecting to, where I need to make sure that, say, before the deployment or something like that, that the connection is actually working. If it's a front-end application, I might want to add visual regression testing. If we're working with something very, very complicated, we might want to look at something like BDD or end-to-end testing or something like that. It really depends on what strategy we're picking for our overall testing strategy, because ideally we want to reduce the amount of like higher level testing that we're doing, because if we put all of our testing at that level, we're going to have quite a lot of flakiness and a lot of false alerts in, assuming now, of course, that we have alerts for the end-to-end test if we do actually decide to go that route. And then we can look at contract testing, of course, if we have some type of APIs that need to connect to each other. It really depends on what the overall investment in our testing strategy is. That is an example of multiple test strategies, because a real senior will know that it very much depends on the project. If you're working on like a tiny little MVP or something like that, there's no real need for you to do unit testing unless you have something very complicated that you're doing, like a specific function that does something super advanced. But if you have a distributed system with tons of different microservices and things like that, it's actually very important for you to know. And in that case, it's we can expand on that, because it's not just about the testing in that scenario. It's also about telemetrics and observability, because you can't debug certain things in a distributed system or figure out if something is working or not working by only doing testing. The integration testing I was talking about, you can do that, but you could also say that, well, actually we want to do some canary releasing or something like that to make sure that it's working, or we might want to take a look at load testing things, depending on, like I said, what level do you want to put this thing in, because you're going to figure out very quickly, if you're an experienced software developer, that you don't have time to do all of that at the same time and deliver all the features at the same time. You have to budget things and then take it in layers, because if you go with the basics first and then focus on the areas that you usually have the most issues in, you will have a more efficient testing strategy than if you just do basically nothing. So that's an example of a question that is very open-ended. It's basically all experience-based, and no real senior is, or sorry, a fake senior is going to be able to answer that in the sort of extent that a company, like, you can hear whether or not they've done this stuff before or not. It's the same thing. How do you debug production code is another one. What tool suite do you pick for your team? Why that one? How do you set up a CI pipeline for your team? And these are just the generic ones. We can go specific as well on back-end, front-end, what type of role they have and so forth, because real seniors, guys, they usually, when they talk, they usually have a lot of experience with multiple areas of the development process, and they can give you answers that are fairly in-depth. That's what I'm talking about. They have life experience, and that's the big difference between a senior and a mid-level. Usually, like the fake seniors, like they are just mid-levels that you pay a lot more, because like they basically code at the same level as a mid-level software developer, but they don't have any life experience. You can't ask them to do even half the stuff that I'm talking about, and that's not that's not a good investment for you as a company, because you're just going to pay them tons and tons of money for basically the same output you would get from a mid-level who needs help to figure out how to work in a DevOps environment, or how to do anything that is more advanced than just the basic coding on a story. So what I want you to take away from this is that the quote-unquote questions that destroy fake seniors is experienced ones. You can make them as open as you want. You don't have to take the ones that I have. It's really that simple. You ask them about specific things that are relevant to the development process. That puts pressure on you, because you need to know this stuff, which is why I tell people that when you're hiring software developers or seniors or things like that, you have to have people who really know their shit in that conversation, because I can promise you guys that there are tons of people who speak with the authority and the confidence of a senior software developer, but if you actually ask them these sorts of questions, they will just give you very high level loose answers where they tell you what they know about, not really what they're doing or the reasoning behind how to think about it, or what is their rationality between one choice or another. And that's usually because they don't really know that stuff. They know that it is important to know about it, and they've heard that others know about it, but they themselves don't really know about it. And that experience is what you pay a senior for. Not necessarily that they know how to code better than everybody else, but because they know how to quickly resolve issues and figure out, sort of get a sixth sense for what's going on, what we should focus on, so forth and so forth. They have to be more experienced than a mid-level, because otherwise, as soon as something that is a little bit out of the domain knowledge of say a mid-level, they're sort of stumped, which is one of the things that, say, for example, me, I have to help quite a lot with. When my developers who have worked for many, like most of them have worked for at least 5 years, when they don't really know how to debug their own framework or figure out their own story, guess who gets to help them to figure that out? And if I can't help them, we're basically fucked. That's what I'm talking about. That's the thing that trips up a fake senior, because they haven't actually done enough work in their own tools, or their at the various larger scale companies, or in situations where they have to really challenge themselves. Because this experience that I'm talking about, that you can hear when you ask someone these questions, that's life experience, and you can't fake that. It doesn't matter, like you will never fake it, because you have to live a life where you face those challenges before you know how to answer those questions in the way that you would expect a senior to do. And if you don't hear that level of understanding of the different topics, it's very likely that you're dealing with someone who's just saying that they're a senior, and you're going to pay them a lot, but they're probably not going to give you much output. Like you could just hire a mid-level or a junior instead. Have a great day.